preparing for college education for your kids, to, any and everything, investments and all those other kinds of things, increasing your credit score, reducing debt, all things finance. He has been here to talk with us before. Stewardship is a major value in the Bible. God uses people who learn how to manage resources, and we learn it. You're not born knowing how to do it. You have to be taught it. And so he has been here before, blessing us in that way. Today, he is here to talk with us specifically about vehicles and strategies for being able to pass wealth from one generation to the next. There's a slice of our community that believes you can't take it with you, so I'm going to cruise it up, Las Vegas it up, smoke it up, drink it up, eat it up before I go. That nobody gave me nothing, and I ain't leaving nobody nothing. And that's why we struggle as a people, because 80% of wealth in America is still inherited. And every generation, the black folks has to start over because we're not intentionally rolling over wealth from one generation to the next. And we're here today for him to tell us how, after a lifetime worth of work, the fruits of those labor can be seeds that produce fruit, and other generations to give them a head start, a jump start, so that when they come out of college with their degrees, their preparation and so forth, that they can begin building wealth much faster, owning homes much faster, building net worth much faster. I talked with a man in the gym the other day at LA Fitness who literally, at 37 years of age, he was independently wealthy. He was selling homes and so forth, and he said he bought his first house at 18. And he's bragging on how wealthy he was, Chuck. And I said, hold up. If you bought your first home at 18, your parents must have kicked in, because you did not, after school, make the kind of money at McDonald's to buy a house cash at 18. He said, well, yeah, my dad did well in real estate, and so he helped me buy my first house cash at 18. I got my real estate license when I was old enough. Now I own several properties, and I just manage the properties, and I don't have to do this. I could just sit at home and manage my wealth. He says, but I do this because I need something to do. 37 years of age, he's independently wealthy, owns a $2.5 million home of his own, and because his daddy was able to help him buy a house cash at 18. We have a president who lied about how he got whatever he got. We won't know how much he got till we see his tax returns. We come to find out his daddy gave him at least $288 million, and every time he went bankruptcy, daddy kicked in for some more cash. So we're here today to talk about how we can give our next generation a head start so they start in a stronger position than what we started with, because we're trying to build wealthy families who become players at the table rather than people crying in the wilderness. How many of you want to see your loved ones become players at the table rather than just crying in the wilderness? Amen. That's why he's here to talk with us. So without further ado, I want to present to you the man of finance, Mr. Dennis Williams, Jr., who's going to come and talk to us about how to leave fruit for the next generation. Let's give him a shout out as he comes.
Good morning, everybody. I want to give a special shout out to the technology ministry and being able to help me this morning get this up on the screen, because my computer was acting funny. It was not being cooperative at all, so I just want to say thank you to these guys. Obviously, we're here to talk about finance. I want to thank you guys for having me. I'm going to start off with a little story. First of all, I've been doing this for a little while, for almost a decade. So if you think back, what happened about a decade ago that you guys can remember that kind of shook every world up? The recession. So it's funny, looking back, I can now say, I was actually pretty fortunate to start my career during that time, because, sometimes, they say the best teacher of all is experience. So obviously being able to look back and see and help people, talk them off of a ledge, essentially, it was a powerful point in a lot of people's lives to be able to come back from that and see the recession and people build their wealth back up. But then we had the opposite. We had some people who saw the recession, saw the things that were happening in the market, and got too scared and got out. sold their investments, got out, and didn't come back. So being able to get that experience coming through the recession and now coming through this huge bull market that we've been a part of, it's been a very, very interesting experience, to say the least. But I'm gonna start off with a story, because I think this will we can actually relate to this. Being part of a black church, being part of about the black community. One thing that I've noticed is that sometimes we kind of can hold a lot of things to our chest as far as sharing information. What kinds of things are we going through? What issues are we having? What opportunities are we looking to address? I mean, this is a huge one. We're talking about finance and estate planning. So the story goes like this. This is actually probably the second or third year I was doing the job as a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch. I work for Edward Jones now, but we'll get into that later. So I was in a banking center. I come in, and it was an elderly. Oh, let me rephrase that. It was a lady who had more experience than I did. I'd say she was she's probably in her 80s, mid 80s, something like that. So for work, she was a teacher. Do we have any teachers in the building? Nice. So if you're a teacher, you know that there's a variety of ways that you can build up retirement savings. You can have pensions, you can have retirement plans, you can have employee directed, things like 401ks. So long story short, she comes into the banking center and she starts talking to me about she wants to retire. So that's what I help people do, right? I help people build plans. So I help people determine, what's the goal? Where do we want to go? Where are we now? Give me all the data. Where are your assets? Where are your liabilities? How do you want to live in retirement? Who are your heirs? What charities do you want to give to? So we figure all these things out in this kind of wheel that we're looking at here. So we went through all this information, and then I said, okay, come back next week, bring me your statements. Bring me all the statements of things that you have as far as assets. So she comes back the next week, and she roughly has about $80,000 in retirement assets and savings. But she didn't know that, in order to actually adequately retire nowadays, you're going to need, $1 million, 1 point, what, she had more experience. So she was, life expectancy, you could say, might be 85 to 90 years old for most people nowadays. So if you're healthy. But long story short, I had to tell her that she couldn't retire. So one of the things that pastors all the time is like, if you remember nothing else about the sermon, remember this. So I'm gonna be saying that a lot today about a couple of things that I'll mention. But we got to start early. We got to start earlier. We got to identify goals, and we got to attach plans to these goals and start that process earlier. Because if we wait till we're 60 and 70 and 80, again, there's no bad time to start. You can always start. But when you're coming to me at 84, still teaching, and so I had to tell her that you have to continue teaching. Like you can't afford to stop working. So again, that's just one of those things where I mentioned, our community, we need to share information. We need to tell other people, are you doing this? So for instance, how many people in here have an employee-sponsored retirement plan? 401k, 403b, whatever it may be. Everybody in here? If you don't, let's talk about it. Like I said, pull me aside, email me, whatever. We'll talk about how to get you involved in yours or to build your own, because there's individual versions of those too. So the first thing I'd like to do, so you guys see this here. So obviously we're talking about where we are today. Everybody's going to be in a different place. So first of all, when you come and meet with somebody like me, we want to very clearly identify where are you today, because people are going to start in different points. People are going to have retirement plans set up already. Some people won't. You'll have pensions. Some people won't. Pensions are a dying thing anyways. I don't have a pension. Some people with more experience than me will have pensions. So identifying where you are today. How much have you saved? What's your income? Those kinds of things. Where do you want to be is obviously the next thing that we need to identify. And that's obviously a conversation that I would obviously have. That's when we start plugging in data. How much do you make now? When you retire, how much do you want to live on in retirement? Those kinds of things. So we'll talk more about that, but we can go to the next slide. So obviously, why leads to how. So developing a strategy is very important. One of those things, if you remember nothing else about this, remember that if you don't have plans, kind of eliminate stress, eliminate anxiety about certain goals. How many people here want to retire? My dad is one of those people, he says he wants to work forever. So I don't know if he really wants to retire or how that looks. So everybody's going to be different. But regardless of what you want to do, you have to have a strategy around that. So for instance, anybody in here, when you retire, you're making X amount of dollars today. When you retire, typically you should be living off of 70 to 90% of the money that you make today. So obviously I have to build that back into some scenarios. I have to be able to actually plan around 70, let's say 70% of what you're making now, so you can live the way you want in retirement. How everybody wants to live is obviously different from person to person. It says like stick with quality, diversify, invest for the long term, and then focus on things you can control. We're going to focus on things that we can control today. So, competing demands. Everybody file their taxes already? Did anybody get money back? Yeah, no, it was an interesting year. That guy in the White House who said everybody's going to be getting more money in their paychecks, he didn't clarify that. He didn't clarify where exactly you'd see the money and didn't tell us that you wouldn't be seeing it now. So that's a whole nother subject. But obviously we have health insurance, we have college, it says vacations, retirement. So there's lots of things that are competing in our lives for our money, right? I would say that we have to identify priorities. For instance, one priority that I've identified is obviously things like tithing, right? The first part of, and it's funny, I actually took a good step last year talking to my wife, and I was like, look, I don't even want to think about it anymore. I went online, I set up the automatic transfer. I don't even think about it. It just comes out, and I don't see it. So now I built my budget around. So yeah, it's one of those things I learned from a really smart guy one day that's like, obviously you have tax money that comes out, you have tithing that comes out. If you build your budget and your lifestyle around, if you make $10,000, if you build it around $8,000, that part is gone, you don't miss it, right? So you're now structuring your life around things that have already gone to the place that you want, like tithing, like saving money for taxes or retirement or whatever. So you got to build your life around things that you prioritize, right? So we can go on to the next one. Plan for your expected. We talk about those. So positioning your portfolio. So what I want to do today, you guys have some handouts. This handout I kind of meant for you guys to have for notes. So if anybody has like pens so you can use this to write on. A lot of the stuff that you see in the investments and services, we're going to discuss briefly, but it'll allow you to obviously circle things you have questions about or write down notes and then kind of follow along as we talk. I want to first start talking about vehicles, right? We all have cars. Well, we have cars. We have different kind of vehicles, right? No matter what vehicle you have, it's going to take a different kind of gas, right, to get there. If you have a Ferrari, you're going to put some real high-octane gas in that Ferrari to get to go, right? If you have a Honda, it's going to be, 87? Just, it's not going to need as much octane to get you where you want. So it's a different kind of gas. If you have, without kind of expanding on that, different kind of vehicles will take different kind of gas. And what I'm going to talk about is each one of us will have a different kind of vehicle, whether that be an IRA, a 401k, just a typical investment account, whether it be a 529 for college, whether it be, there's lots of different kinds of vehicles or accounts. But obviously the gas we put in those accounts is going to be different based on where you want to go. If I want to go to the moon, I'm putting rocket fuel in that thing. We're really going to get that thing going, and you can't put kind of some different kind of gas. It's not going to get you there. So we can go to the next slide. So this is kind of I like to put numbers to things, and I'm going to write something down right now. So the slide that you see up there now, it says over time a little goes a long way. So a lot of times when people come in and I'll talk to them about money, I'll ask things like, if I gave you $100,000 right now, where would it go? Or I'll ask, if I gave you $50,000 tomorrow, where would you put it, right? So a lot of times I ask those questions to see, okay, what did your plan look like? So everybody, if I ask any of you guys that question, hopefully, whether it be now or later on down the road, you better say, oh, if you gave me 50 grand, I would put it in this account, this account, this account. I'd pay maybe this off, and the rest would go to tithing or something like that, right? So you have a plan for where that money would go. So if you look at this one, so this talks about $50, $100, $200 a month. You can clearly see how much that would be over 5, 10, 15, and 18 years. I believe it's getting a 7% rate of growth. So I wrote a little equation here that says 8%. So this is just showing you guys some numbers, because we're going to start talking about the vehicles, but we're also going to talk about the gas that I mentioned before. So a long time ago, I was probably like 13 years old. We were traveling with my uncle. Some of you guys met my uncle, Victor McFarlane. I will never forget the day he said, nephew, how would you like to have $1 million? And I said, I would really like that. And I say, I already know what I would do with it, actually. So we started talking about, we started dreaming what all the things that I would do with this $1 million. I do all kind of stuff as a 13-year-old kid, right? It'd be different now. Thinking about that years down the road, I still remember that conversation. So I actually went, and this was probably, I told you guys I kind of got in the industry around 2008, around recession time. So I was talking to people about how do you get to retirement? How do you make $1 million? So I put it in a formula. So you guys can write these notes down if you want. That $4,000 is $4,000. How many of you guys can afford to save $4,000 a year? So, and of course, all these things, it's a math problem. Math is facts, right? So we can always adjust things as necessary, but this is kind of just a starting point. $4,000 a year. I should have wrote a dollar sign there. I kind of rushed. 8%, that's a rate of return. There's lots of things that we can find to get you an 8% rate of return. There are things we can find to get a higher or lower. Kind of depends on where you are and what kind of risk you're willing to take. The next number, 40, that's 40 years. So obviously when starting today, the sooner that we start, the easier it will be to get to your goal. When you look at risk, it's all about time. It's all about obviously the types of investments that you choose. But time is actually one of the biggest ways that you can reduce risk. You give yourself more time to get towards a goal. Time can actually reduce or take a lot of risk off the table. But those three things right there will get you just over $1 million. So again, like I said, it's fact. Some people look at that and say, Dennis, I don't want to wait 40 years for $1 million. Well, can you save $5,000? Can you save $6,000? Can you save, and like I said, if you have a 401k, a lot of times you're able to actually do that in that 401k. So how you do it, we can talk, that's, people will do it a variety of ways. But again, that's math. 8%, that's actually, I would consider that a kind of a moderate, that's not hard to achieve over time. Based on things that I've seen and based on experience that I've had doing this for people over time. So an 8% rate of return, we can search for for higher rates of return. That's not going 9%, 10%. So again, it's all about risk and addressing that risk. But again, we can change that too. But it all depends on the individual. 40 years, again, we can alter that as well. Hey, you want to retire earlier? We can adjust the rest of that math problem to figure that out, right? So again, I just want to show you guys that. I show young people this all the time. Anytime I ever sit with a young person, that's one of the first things I show them, and I ask them a rhetorical question. Do you want $1 million? Yes. What would you do with it? Okay, great. Here's how you get it. So we kind of have those conversations, and then we change things as we go. Go to the next. So the first, getting to vehicles. A lot of us have 401ks, 403bs. You have the TERS, the PERS, the SIR, all these different names for 401ks. There are Roth versions of that. Sometimes you guys as employers will allow you to do that, and sometimes you won't. So it kind of just depends on your plan rules. If you guys aren't sure about those things, you just call your providers or your HR, and they can tell you, or you can ask me, and we can figure that out. But obviously, this is an employer-sponsored plan. Any dollar that you put into these plans, as far as if it's a pre-tax dollar, reduces your taxable income. So how many people would say that they're pretty comfortable and confident on how 401ks work? Okay. So there are some specific rules about these things, though, that are kind of interesting. Did you guys know that you can take a loan from a 401k? Okay. Did you guys know about how much you can save in a 401k? Okay. So last time it was $18,500, $19,000 this year. If you're over 50, it's a catch-up contribution of an additional $6,000. So you can actually save a lot of money. For business owners, if we have any business owners in the room, you can actually, let's say if I own my own business, it was just me and my wife. She didn't even work for me, but it's just me. I'm married, so I can actually set up what's called a solo 401k. So a lot of business owners don't know. So if you have your own business or some kind of business on the side, you can actually set up a solo version of this. If you have 3 or 4 employees, you can still set up a version like this. And there's other kinds of plans we can talk about too for business owners, but this is kind of just talking about that, the one that most of us know about, the 401k. Traditional and Roth IRAs. We know about the differences between the two of these. Traditional IRAs is pre-tax. So it's kind of like we talk about the 401k, that's kind of my personal version of that. So I can set this up to supplement for people who say, hey, I really care about retirement. I want to get there faster. Set up an IRA. I actually have one of each of these. And the reason is traditional IRAs, that's pre-tax money. Roth IRAs is after-tax money. So kind of depends on what you want to do. If you want to, hey, when I retire and I want to go on that trip with my sister or whoever, and I don't want to take out another 10 grand to go on that trip, let me take it out of my Roth IRA because it's not going to affect my taxes at all. So that's another thing that I would highly recommend. And there's ways to get around that. If somebody says, hey, I make too much money to put into a Roth IRA, we can do what's called a backdoor Roth, where we can take money that's pre-tax, we can, work the system, so to speak, and we can get money into a Roth anyway. And when you retire, it's a good tool to have because that growth, you put $10,000 to a Roth IRA over however many years, it grows to $1 million, you pay no tax on the growth. So it's a good tool to have. How many people have kids in their lives that they care about? Yeah. Sometimes you have to add qualifying statement, words, It's like, I know some people who the situation might be different, but kids, if you want to prepare for your kids, these are 2 ways to do it. We can go to the next slide because they'll talk about. So we talk about custodial accounts on that slide, and then 529s. I'll say another quick story real quick about my son. And a lot of you guys probably relate with this. So I have a 7-year-old son. When I first started his custodial account, he was 4 years old. We oftentimes will have kids and we'll have birthdays, Christmas, where we'll give a lot of gifts to these kids, right? How many times have you guys had a kid who either got a gift he already has or got a gift he opened it up, played for 5 seconds, and he never looked at it again? How often does that happen, right? So, or if somebody gives him a gift that, like a little drum set at 4 years old, where it's like he's banging on a drum I don't want to hear that, right? I would have rather you get whatever the value of that gift was. Let's take that and let's grow it. So basically a custodial account, that's a version of this, right? So custodial account, I'm the custodian for my son's account. I sat him down one day and I kind of started talking about, I think it was Disney or Nike, something like that. It was one of those companies. And I kind of started talking about, hey, Isaiah, how would you like to own a piece of that shoe that you have on? How would you like to own a piece of Mickey, right? I never forget that. And he got all excited because he's like, I can own a piece of Mickey. And he started talking about his glove and started talking about all kind of parts of Mickey that he could own. But what I did was I started telling people, we don't need, thank you for the gifts, thank you for the toys, but I bet you he would like, even if you gave him half of what you were going to give him for that toy, let's grow that money in a custodial account. So what I've been doing is I put the money in the custodial account, and I'm buying. He's had in his portfolio right now. He has Nike stock, Netflix stock, because the kid loves what kid doesn't love Netflix? Netflix, Disney. I think he has Apple stock as well. He has some Bank of America because he liked. I used to work for Bank of America, so he always loved Bank of America. So, but he has 5 or 6 stocks. Again, all things that he can relate to. All things that he actually, so I'll come home from work and he'll say, Dad, how did my portfolio do today? He's 7 now. So now he's kind of getting, he's like, and I told him, like Netflix, for instance, he bought Netflix, was like $99, and now it's obviously over $300. So he's able to actually tangibly see, I had this money, it's grown to this, let me give you more, right? So my goal is to make him a millionaire before he's 18. It's just a kind of a far out goal. But, and I'll teach him how to manage that money well. But custodial accounts is one way, because you can use that for anything, right? When the kid gets 18, my name comes off, it goes straight to him. So I have to educate him on, don't do anything, don't get out there and buy that Ferrari and go kill, don't do that. But custodial accounts is one way. The next way is 529 plans. So there was a rule change last year where 529 plans used to be just for college. Now you can use them for college and anything underneath that. So you can use them for K through 12 education, as well as college, which they obviously were meant for college expenses. It's funny, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but these are really, I have these for my kids as well. you can use them for tuition, books. You can use them for computers, programs. You can use them for almost anything that the kid would need. You can use them for a cool story. I had a client who was a French citizen, but his daughter was born here. And I was trying to talk to him about setting one of these up because he cared about college expenses, but I was trying to make it relevant to him. He's like, well, I plan on going back to France one day, and my daughter, I think she wants to go to the school I went to. So I looked it up, and of course, you can actually use these expenses even abroad. So even international schools, you can use these. So any school will accept, because you can use these however you want. The custodian, the participant, control. So for instance, I'm the participant for my plan, my son's plan. I control all the funds. I control where they go. If you gave me well, you can put $14,000 in per year. Actually, it's 15 now. But if you were to give me that money to go into my son's plan, I control it. He doesn't control it. No one else controls it. So, that thing can grow up, and it's obviously growing with the use of investments, the gas that we put into that thing from the start. So, this is a great option. Let's say if son number one gets a scholarship, I can actually take that whole 529 plan and put my next son as a beneficiary. So I can change beneficiaries. Say none of my kids need it. I can change it back to myself. I can use it for my own school. If he gets a scholarship, I can take the amount of scholarship penalty-free out and use it for whatever I want to use it for. So there's a lot of flexibility with these 529 plans, but it's another great tool because of the flexibility and who controls it. So it's a great one to have. Anybody paying for school now? How many people are paying for college expenses right now? Ooh. I feel for you guys. I'll be there one day. Obviously, you see here, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. We have people who will take loans out for school, and we have people who will, again, get ahead of that, save for it, so that they have the money in something like a 529 or custodial plan so they can do that later. So there's different ways to approach that. I wanted to put some numbers together and kind of show you guys the cost of things, to come. Things that are now, you can kind of see the price of different colleges and universities locally, and then you can see what it's going to be in 10 years, and you can see what it's going to be in 18 years. So I'm going to be in the cost in 10 years category. And that's that. I don't like seeing that. So I have to do that for 2 kids. We have other kids coming along, so it's an interesting number to have to wrap your mind around. So, hey, your kid gets a scholarship, your kid doesn't, and you have to pay for it. He pays for it, we pay for it. So you got to figure out how you're going to attack that goal. But it's good to see numbers to your plan. I have a really cool tool at work that will allow me to plug in. Let's say if you went to Purdue University, I can plug in your individual school and see what your cost is today. And then I can project out what that cost will be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, depending upon your kid's age. So you can actually plan around a specific number. But it's good to see that kind of what you got there. Diversify. Let's start talking about the gas. So you guys have one handout, which looks like this. I wanted to give you guys just kind of this would be considered a moderate, not super aggressive, not conservative, but right in the middle. But I wanted you guys to see some numbers. And I wanted you to see, hey, if somebody came in and spoke to a financial advisor, what would it look like if I was a middle-of-the-road person and they were to construct a portfolio of stocks and bonds and cash and real estate? What would that look like? So you see that pyramid up there. This is kind of give you an idea. It talks about what it would grow to over, I think that's, was that 17 years? It talks about best and worst performance. So again, this workshop is to talk about, obviously, the things that you're building, over time, and then what do we do with them? How can we benefit the next generation, and how can we have people like Ray come and help us structure that properly? So we'll kind of briefly touch on these, but these are conversations we can have in more depth later. So there's lots of different ways to invest. There's gold, there's silver, there's internet, companies, stocks, there's tech, there's real estate, there's oil, there's all kind of ways to do it. And everybody's different. So everybody wants to invest differently. I had a client come in 2 days ago, actually. He said, I want to invest for the future, but I don't want anything that has anything to do with cigarettes or anything that has to do with oil or depleting or harming our planet. So I had to be a little creative, come back and obviously build something that kind of catered to that. But everybody's different, and it's good to get those things out there in front of the people, your team, who's helping you, your real estate people, your lawyers, your planners, and your advisors. But sticking with quality is always good. So stocks, we all know how stocks work. You're buying a piece of something. If NBCF was a stock, you give NBCF some money, you get a piece. You own a piece of NBCF, depending upon how much that share cost, and kind of obviously the performance. What are the projected earnings? What is it going to do in the future? So you kind of see how that works, and obviously these things fluctuate. So this would be on a scale of risk. This is on the other side, on the more aggressive side. And there's, it's funny, you can break that little piece off, and there's conservative to aggressive stocks as well. For instance, Johnson & Johnson would be a conservative version of this. Tesla would be an aggressive version of this. So there's each category will have its own continuum of risk within that category. Average return. So this is kind of just talking about stocks in general, and it's looking at performance of stocks that pay a dividend. How many people know what a dividend is? So when you retire, dividends are going to become really, really important. Like a lot of times when I talk with people who are retiring, we're literally shifting their entire portfolio from things that don't have dividends or a mixture of the two to things that have, like literally all companies in this portfolio have dividends. And obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. When you have a stock, there's ways you can make money off of the price, moving, and then companies that pay a dividend, that's a whole nother way to make money, which is obviously income. They make enough money that they can pay all their bills, satisfy all their requirements, and then pay back money to their shareholders. So what this is kind of showing you is that in great markets, companies that had dividends outperformed companies that didn't. In bad markets, companies that had dividends were less affected by the negativity in the market than companies that didn't. And there's lots of reasons for that. And we can get into that, but like I said, quality makes a difference. Companies that have been around a long time make a difference. Companies that have a track record of growing dividends make a difference. And again, this is just one of the kinds of gas you put in those vehicles, all the ones we talked about already. Bonds are interesting. Bond is nothing but a loan. How many people have loaned somebody money before? So essentially you kind of, in a way, you've kind of created an individual type of bond. So when you have a bond, you're loaning money to somebody and you have stipulations. I want X amount of dollars over this time. So a bond is no different. Companies can issue bonds. City of Seattle can issue bonds. Anyone can issue a bond, and there's credit ratings associated with those bonds. So if I were to issue a bond right now and give it out to the public, my credit rating would be horrible because I've never done it before. Nobody knows if I'm actually going to pay their money back. It can be really iffy, right? So, but then again, if City of Seattle were to issue a bond, their credit rating is going to be pretty good. I think they have like a double A? A rating, whatever. It's above investment grade. It's a really good rating, right? So likelihood of if you gave City of Seattle your money for the new bridge they want to, or whatever they want to build or do in City of Seattle, likelihood of you getting paid back is pretty high because they have a track record of doing it, and you can see that in their credit rating. So one of the things I'll try to do a lot when people are building like living trusts and all these kind of plans for retirement is, depending upon who you are and kind of where you are in this pyramid, if your income part of your portfolio is significant, meaning that you want to take less risk, or you're closer to retirement, or you need more interest, essentially, we're going to look for things that might be tax-free. You guys, municipal bonds or government bonds that when you get that income, you're not taxed on it, right? So I was talking to Pastor Braxton was mentioning a church that had this huge endowment. And I was just thinking, I wonder what their mix looks like. I wonder what part of their portfolio has the stocks and bonds and dividends and interest income and tax-free income. Because if you have enough money for any organization or person, and you have enough tax-free income just being kicked off to support that person or entity, I mean, it could be huge. So we got to get people to build things up so that essentially we have the luxury of taking less risk and just collecting income, just collecting checks. Kind of like real estate. You have real estate, you have renters. As long as they don't leave, as long as they don't mess with you, you're just collecting a check, that kind of thing. Except for you pay tax on that and not in this circumstance. Individual bonds is predictable. We talked about federal and income tax-free. That's a possibility. They're meant to preserve wealth, so you go with some really high-quality bond issuers, then you're not really worried about, not getting your money back, because that's what it's all about. It's about loaning your money, getting paid for it while you wait to receive it back. So muni bonds. So we kind of talked about a little bit as far as avoiding taxes. When you retire, that becomes a pretty big deal. even now, it's a pretty big deal. So if you can find ways to get a nice rate of return with avoiding taxes, then we talk about these kind of things. This is a cool slide. I don't know if you guys hopefully can see it pretty well. Can you guys see that? Okay. You said no? No? Okay. So essentially what this is looking at is it's looking at three different types of, let's see. So it's looking at a $100,000 investment. It's looking at somebody who's in a 24% tax bracket, a 32% tax bracket, and a 37%. These are tax brackets on the three on the left. So it's basically saying, hey, if you made, if you put a $5,000 investment in a certain type of taxable investment, if you were in those tax brackets, you're going to lose $1,200 here, $1,600 here, $1,850 here. So this is getting a 5% return on the three on the left. If you look at the last one, you're getting a lower return, which is 4%. Same investment of $100,000, so you're getting $4,000 here, but it's tax-free. So you kept all $4,000 of that income that came in, as opposed to you're getting $5,000 you made over here off of that $100,000, but you only kept $3,800, $3,400, and $3,350. So that's we talk a lot about. We talk about a lot about tax equivalent yields. So you can make less money from a rate perspective, but keep more of it in your pocket simply because of taxes. So that's another thing that's really important for entities, for people, for anybody who's tax sensitive. Mutual funds. Are we able to play that video? Forget it. So I had some videos. My computer was acting funny, so we're just going to forget the videos. But mutual funds, we talked about stocks, real estate. That one slide that had a whole bunch of things going on. Stocks, real estate, gold, silver, tech, whatever. All different kinds of investments. A mutual fund, you guys probably everybody in this room, I wouldn't be surprised I'd be surprised if everyone in this room hasn't had experience with mutual funds in the past or isn't currently holding them. A mutual fund is nothing but a collection of all those investments in one investment, essentially, in a share of a mutual fund. So you can buy one share of a mutual fund and get exposure to 100 different investments, 100 different stocks, 100 different bonds. Combination of stocks and bonds in one investment themselves. So mutual funds exist simply to allow people who don't have $100,000 to invest to diversify in one shot. That's really all it is. One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people aren't clear on how fees are charged with mutual funds. And I could write that down, 1051. And this ends at 11:30. Right? So I can write that. How many people would like to see kind of, show of hands, who cares to see about mutual fund fees and expenses? All right. What I was going to write down would have taken probably a minute, but I'll save the minute for this. But essentially, when you buy a mutual fund, you can buy them in different share classes. It could be like an A share, a B share, a C share, an I share. So depending upon the share class you buy, you'll pay fees, an entry fee. You buy it today, you pay an entry fee to get in, or you'll pay a fee on the back end, like you sell it 5 years from now. So you give me a 5% fee to get your money back, essentially. Or sometimes you'll pay a level load. It's called a load charge, where you'll pay a somewhat higher load fee than, say, an A share or a B share over time, but you will not pay an entry fee or a get out early fee or something like that. So there's different ways to do that, and it all depends on time, really. It all depends on time to your goal. So there's different ways. Obviously, mutual funds, when you look at them, how do you make money off them? You can make money off of the price of the mutual fund going up and down. If it's a mutual fund that has bonds in it, then you can make money off of interest coming in. If it's a mutual fund that has stocks in it or real estate or something else, then it's capital gain. So in that mutual fund, if you have a bunch of things, sometimes the manager of the fund will sell things, create a capital gain, and distribute it out to us. So those are the kind of the ways that you make. Obviously, you can get more complex than that, but essentially that's really what it looks as far as how you benefit. So there's trade-offs, benefits, diversification, professional management. It's liquid. You can sell it today. In 3 business days, your money is liquid. You have it to do whatever you want to do. There's discipline for the most part. You have people who hopefully have discipline in how they're managing that fund, and they say, we're managing for these reasons, and they stick to those reasons. So it's funny. It says the benefit is choices. I would say no. So when you have those fiduciary, usually you're talking about like say a trust company, which Edward Jones, a lot of these different companies have trust companies, which they have to be legally a fiduciary. And you're looking at a whole different standard when you talk about fiduciaries, because you legally have to have policy statements in place. You legally have to have things in order. So if somebody were to come in, and they come in and audit those books often. So you have to have certain things in place to consider yourself a fiduciary. There was a rule change in end of 2016 that basically said anyone who's a financial advisor has to be a fiduciary. But then it's funny, Trump came in and he took that back. He kind of said, we don't really need to do that. A fiduciary basically the definition is kind of putting your interests in front of mine and the firm's. I've never had an issue with that. I figure that's kind of why we're in this business, because we got to take care of the people, right? It's the people first. So, but that's a good question. It's a good question to ask. Are you a fiduciary? I mean, how do you approach that? It's a great question to ask a financial advisor, because different people will have different approaches. But these mutual funds, no mutual fund would ever be able to say we're a fiduciary, because they're trying to satisfy too many needs, right? You can have a mutual fund that has a million different people that invest in that mutual fund. They have billions under management. So it's a different. Usually it's an entity or a person who's a fiduciary, not necessarily a thing, a vehicle or something like that. Hope they answered the question. Call and prepayment. So yeah, and there's some other risks involved if you have certain types of investment mutual funds, but that's making retirement last. So this is an interesting slide. You're going to see this one again if we get through all of them. But basically, if you're married, if you're not, life expectancy, that's a huge part of planning around all this stuff. Life expectancy. We want to be able to plan around how long you're going to be here on it. None of us know, right? We can look at our parents, we can look at our grandparents. How long did they live? That might give you some kind of, but then again, we're eating different, we're doing different things, so you never know, right? But right there is saying, at least one person in a marriage, could last past age 90. So we have to be prepared for that, because that's 25, 30, 35 years that you have to work with the assets that you've worked so hard to save, and they have to last, hopefully for this generation, hopefully for now, and hopefully to benefit the people who come behind you, right? So we gotta work that in the scenario. This talks a little bit about inflation. You guys, how many people have felt the impacts of inflation over the last decade? How many people, for instance, like rent is a good one, right? Rent, those kind of things go up over time, unfortunately. Sometimes they go up, like in Seattle or in this area, they go up a lot faster than they could other places, right? So we got to be able to, the effects of inflation. This talks about new cars, a tank of gas, and monthly groceries. So groceries is also something that we all can relate to. We're all going to be buying food, paying for food, and I've noticed the price of food being different between now and when I first moved out of my parents' house. It's like, man, it is, and I eat a lot, and I like to cook a lot. So if you come over to my house, you'll get good food, but it's expensive. So if you look at, the cost of groceries, how many people would say that outside of their living, like where you live, groceries is the next most expensive, food is the next most expensive line item on your budget? Here's another question. You don't have to raise your hands. Raising is great. How many people in this room work off of a budget? Like actually have a actual budget that they work off, and it grows and lives with them on a month-to-month basis? If you don't, I have some cool tools that can easily, maybe next time I come, I'll actually write here on the board how you can literally 5 minutes, create your own budget, stick to it, and grow with it over time. It's a beautiful thing. Estate planning. Let's get to what we want to do to keep the money rotating and in circulation with our people and the things that we care about. So now, I might lean on some expertise from Ray, but we can go to the next slide. So a team approach. Obviously, that says Edward Jones just because I work for Edward Jones, and it says Edward Jones Financial Advisor. But wherever your financial advisor is, you want to coordinate those people so that they're communicating. Your financial advisor, your estate planning attorney, your tax professional. These people are going to want to be talking because you want to make sure that things are, for instance, if you have a trust, and then you have a whole bunch of stuff that's outside of the trust and they haven't been actually structured in the name of the trust, the trust does no good. So if these people aren't communicating, then you're literally spinning your wheels, essentially. You're not accomplishing the goal that you have set out to accomplish. So, and of course we can give kind of advice and guidance around, you're looking to benefit this certain thing, here's what you should do. And then coordinate that with the people that are on that list. Estate planning goals, asset transfer. How many people here are worried or concerned or want to protect the people who are coming behind them? Whether it be kids, whether it be the church, whether it be a school you went to. It could be, there's a lot of different things. I actually had a client recently. She has what's called a charitable, how many people have heard of a charitable, we talked about that already? Charitable remainder trusts? So you guys know what those are. Essentially, let's say I'm retired today. Let's say I have $1 million in an account that's meant to support me right now for retirement. The charitable remainder trust, any interest and income that comes off of that is meant to benefit me now so I can live, right? The day that I go to meet Jesus, anything that's in that charitable remainder trust will go to whatever charities that I designate. It'll go, hey, 50% is going to NBCF, 40% is going to Western Washington University, 10% is going to Seattle Children's Hospital. It could be it could be whatever you want, but having those kind of things in place makes it, the moment that you transition to the next life, things are already set in place, and we've already kind of talked about that. So having those kind of things is extremely important because it's, like I said, tax control. You can do things in a way where your taxes do not eat away at this benefit. So huge. So these are estate planning overviews. So I'm going to go back to the vehicles that we talked about. Right there on the second line item, it says beneficiary designation. For anyone who has a retirement plan, and actually a retirement plan, bank account, anything with money in it, any kind of asset, I would implore you as soon as possible, we've already kind of been talking about this, make sure that your beneficiaries, your transfers on death, and those sorts of things. I have on my computer, we might be able to pull up at the end, but you have to make sure those things are in order. And I'll give you a great example of, like I said, I support a lot of banks. So I have people who come into a bank. Let's say if you came into a bank and I'm your son and I die, but I don't have these things in place and I didn't name you as a beneficiary. All of a sudden, you come into Bank of America or whatever bank, and you're saying, well, Dennis passed away. I'm looking to get access to his money because I'm his mom or I'm his sister or whoever. The bank is going to look at you and send you on your way because they're not going to do that. They're not going to let you have access to anything. And all of a sudden, then and then you can provide all kind of documentation to prove that you're my sister, my mom, or whoever, my dad, anybody, right? It doesn't matter. If you're not listed as the transfer on death, so for instance, any account that's not a retirement account would be a transfer on death. So you have a savings account, a checking account. Transfer on death is what you want to go to your bank, to your institution, and actually add your people as your transfer on death. If not, that's going to probate. It could be months, it could be taxes, it could be all kinds of things that are going to whittle that thing down. So it's you don't want that. If it's a retirement account, you have to make sure, and you can name entities, you can name people, but you want to make sure that your beneficiaries are set to and you probably want to review those things every so often because life changes. And your one beneficiary could be it could be cool one day, and the next day you might not want to speak to that beneficiary anymore. I'm trying to think. There was a situation where so sometimes you have situations where people aren't clear of mind. I think I was talking to Mrs. Braxton about this actually, and she gave me a great example of somebody who, let's say it was I think it was some person's aunt or whatever. Let's say it was the person's aunt. She was not in the clear frame of mind. So somebody, let's say a cousin or whoever, comes in and coerces that aunt to change the beneficiaries to whoever they want them to be, whoever they wanted their to be, which is obviously themselves. But you need to have people in your life who are reviewing those things and making sure, is this who you really want to be your beneficiary? Because the moment you transition, that money will go. If your will says one thing, but your beneficiaries say another, the beneficiaries supersede the will and supersede all those other things that you might have in place. So you have to make sure that beneficiary designations are there and correct and relevant. Trusts, wills, life insurance, we'll talk about that in future slides. Beneficiaries, we just talked about that. Let's see, life insurance policies. So yeah, we talked about that. Transfers on death, we talked about that. Avoids probate. That's the biggest thing. I'm telling you, I've seen this literally when I was supporting banking centers. I would see this, I'd say once every other week, or sometimes once a week, where people will come in because it happens. That's a natural part of life, and we have to be we have to prepare ourselves for that. Sometimes I've noticed that people are kind of apprehensive to talk about mortality. Would you guys say that's a true statement? Anything that has to do with mortality, whether it be, hey, I'm planning for retirement, that's an easy one, right? But sometimes people will put that off because, like, oh, that's kind of in the back of my mind, that's referencing me not being here anymore. So maybe I don't need to worry about that right now. Or things like transfers on death, going to the bank to talk about transferring my money on death. Sometimes people have an issue with that because it's talking about me dying. Everybody does it. So I hate to make it sound so so certain and take away some of the emotion around it, but it is what it is, and we need to prepare. If you remember nothing else about this workshop, remember this. You're going to die. You're going to die, and you want to be prepared for it before you do that. Account registration. Same thing. Obviously, you have insurance policies, pensions. We talked about all these things. You need to make sure the registration is correct. We kind of talked about that. What is a will? We got pretty in depth on that. I saw the video. So it's like we all know what a will is. Trusts are more important than those. It's good to have a will, and there's we talk about pour over wills. So pour over wills, things that aren't included in the trust. We create another entity which will capture all the things that aren't in it. So having those things structured and including all the vehicles we talked about in those wills, in those trusts, are very important for obvious reasons. I'm pretty sure your beneficiaries would appreciate if you had $1 million, actually receiving that million versus receiving $750,000 or $700,000 or like or any number that's below that number that you said that you have written that they're gonna get. So wills and trusts and charitable remainder trusts and things like, we'll talk about an ILIT later in a second, but yeah, got to make sure those are good. Executor, I'll let you talk about that. We can talk about that later. If anybody has questions, we'll save time, but essentially you want to have a good executor in place. Don't have a will when you die. You guys know what happens when you don't have a will, right? That happens. You do not want that to happen. Because I've seen people who have been in this process for 6 months, 7 months, a year, and are still trying to get access to their loved ones' assets. And it's not people being greedy, it's just going through this process. It's costly and it takes time. What is a trust? I had a video on this. My computer started acting funny, so I might have to send that video out to you guys. But a trust is a legal arrangement. Kind of talked about this already. Institution trustees and all those kind of things, and have certain beneficiaries on file. What can a trust do? I like the last one. Provide tax benefits. Any way that we can work the system to keep more of our money, I'm all about that, and helping people actually do that. So, and a trust is a great tool. So revocable living trusts. This is something that everyone here can do. Everyone here can set up. Obviously, you take everything you own, title it in the name of that revocable living trust. If anything changes, you can change it. It's a revocable living trust. So, like I said, it avoids probate. Your assets go to who you want them to go to. All those vehicles we talked about are already spoken for. So it's just getting this work done. Benefits, avoids probate, names trustees, provides privacy. That's a big one, actually. I forgot about that one in terms of when you pass away, sometimes all your assets, they can be public information. Sometimes people don't want that. Having a trust avoids that. All those things are kept private. The only person that knows about them is your beneficiaries and then the trustees. Testamentary trusts created by your will when you die, if your will kind of dictates that. Irrevocable living. So this is one I want to talk about. I think can be really powerful. We were talking with, what was it? You guys hear that kind of thing that everybody's been talking about reparation, that reparation conversation coming up? So that's something that obviously strikes right to the heart of of this church, our community, are people that look like us, essentially. All people, right, in the United States, in some capacity. What that whole conversation is talking about, certain disenfranchised people were not given the ability to transfer assets the way that some others were, right? Insurance is a huge way to do that, to be able to set something up that is not necessarily the money that you've saved up over time, because that's one way, right? We could save up money and we could pass that money on. Another way is to do something like this. So this is an irrevocable trust in the sense that you have a trust. It's called, another name for it is an ILIT, but you have a trust and you basically gift money to your trust that's used to purchase life insurance. It can be term insurance, it can be permanent insurance. And so how you do that, obviously you plan around that, but that money is an awesome tool because it's tax-free. It's separate from my estate. It's not added to my money that I pass on. It's another entity, but it allows me to benefit. I mean, when I die, the things that I care about are going to be taken care of through something like this. So it's not the investments, but it's another vehicle that basically will allow you to, that death benefit, which could be, obviously can be huge, right? Not added to my estate, goes straight to whoever I want to benefit, my kids, my church, whoever I care about. So again, this is something that's completely separate from you. You gift money to the trust, and it allows you to really have a huge impact. This is something that not a lot of people know about or do, but I would highly recommend, if you have the ability to, if you can add that to your budget, hey, I can afford to put money towards this would be a great tool. And the sooner you do it, the less it's going to cost. From insurance, you guys know how insurance works, life insurance. If you do it sooner, then it's not going to cost you as much. So term and permanent, one of the handouts you guys have is this one, preparing for the unexpected. So this kind of goes hand in hand with what we'll talk about next. But so we use kind of like a lot of devices to remember things, like the word life, talking about providing for liabilities. The I in the life is talking about income. The F is talking about, is it family? Family, I think it is. And then the E is talking about expenses, or we talking about income? Yeah, expenses and things like that. So just using those kind of things and using these tools. So obviously there's term life insurance and there's, permanent life insurance, long-term care. There's lots of different ways that you can attack these opportunities to save for and provide for, these things that we all care about. One thing that I've noticed more than anything over the years is that we all care about the same things. Like it's not that you want to retire and I don't. We both want to retire, or we both want to be able to work how we want to work, or we all know that healthcare issues are going to arise. We all know that we're gonna die one day. So we all care about the same things. It's just different parts in our life will dictate the kind of tools we'll use to get there. Next slide. Life insurance, immediate source of funds. We know about this already. Term life insurance. So obviously a term, it usually costs less because you're only paying for a specific part of your life. Like right now, my term life insurance is probably going to be the requirement in which I'm going to need if I were to die tomorrow is going to be higher than, say, my dad. I'll use you as an example. So it's going to be different. Your expenses are different, right? You don't have 2 kids, school, income, all these different things that are expenses that are here. It's just different, right? So obviously, term life insurance could be appropriate depending upon where you are in life, or whole life. Again, those can be different as well. But you can put them in things like the trust, is if you thought that was a good idea, or if your advisors thought that was a good idea. Permanent life insurance, tax deferred. It's great to be able to pass tax-free money on to people. Just think of how much they'll like you. They love you already. Just think how much they love you when you're gone. And this comes over. It's like, oh, this is a whole nother. I really love that. I really love that guy. Healthcare, living will, durable power of attorney. We talked about those documents already, but having those in place is huge. How it affects my world, if you have investments, and let's say if having a durable power of attorney on file and the ability to have somebody who can speak on my behalf in case I'm ever incapacitated, or I don't know, I need help in whatever regard, having this on file is huge, because a lot of times I'll have, say, a mother and son come in, or a grandmother and whoever come in, and if you don't have that on file, grandson can't help grandma kind of talk about her account at all, talk about what to do with that account, how to structure it, or do anything. So having these things on file are huge, because again, it's all about you put up work in the front end to make life easier on the back end, kind of thing. It's just another one of those examples. Long-term care. How many people here think they're going to need long-term care coverage at some point? I don't think I'll need it. Kelly's just going to take care of me. I'm going to pay her. But long-term care is extremely expensive. Short amount, it doesn't really matter. Anytime you're receiving this kind of care, it costs. I was kind of asked to talk. I had somebody who asked me about this, and so I wanted to include this in case we all kind of care about these kind of things. So long-term care, if you're looking at the kind of cost, so you see, I think the average time a person spends in this kind of receiving this kind of care was right around 2.5 years. So it could be longer, it could be shorter, it kind of depends. But obviously you can see the price, the cost. So those are the kind of things, again, planning up front, because this can be, talk about disrupting your plan on passing money to an heir or to an entity because sometimes obviously you can be in a position where you have no idea what's going on. You're in long-term care, you're being cared for, and your money is being just drained daily. And like I said, over a short amount of time, you can spend a lot of money just living, in that whole time period. So long-term care insurance, you guys already saw this slide once. 60% chance in a couple that one person will live past 90. The likelihood of needing long-term care past 90 is up there. I mean, I forgot that it's like 70, 80% that a person over that age would need something like long-term care. So having that insurance in place, again, building around that, it could be a game changer. If we talk about traditional medical expenses, kind of paying, what would it cost? People ask me that all the time when we plan for things. So that's kind of on average what it would cost a year to pay for medical expenses. Again, when we do we have something called financial foundations, which it doesn't matter what age, where you are, all these inputs that go into your plan, this kind of living, breathing plan that you have, these are the kind of things that we add into it because we add different scenarios. What if you need this? What if you need twice this because something really crazy is happening? What if, how much do you have saved? And what if you need this at age 80 versus age, so we can add in all these different scenarios, but these are the kind of things that we need to be able to plan for people appropriately so that, again, you're not surprised when you get to age whatever and you have to pay for something like this. So this is, when you start talking about long-term care insurance, these are about the ages that you want to start thinking about it, pricing it out, seeing if it's worth including in your budget. Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, you said you purchased long-term care insurance when you were young. Uh-huh.
They would allow me to live there?
If you outlive how much coverage you have?
Right. And I'm in a nursing home. I'm incapacitated, and I'm in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And I'm still 101, and I have no money left. They give me the black pill?
Yeah. So, that's a touchy one. That's a sensitive subject. It's like, based on what I know, whoever is your beneficiary, whoever's taking care of you, they probably ask to find other arrangements, or maybe they would have to foot the bill at that point. Or like I said, hopefully all your assets have been depleted and we're able to actually find another source to pay for that. But in that circumstance, they're not going to provide you care if the coverage isn't there. So that's another situation. Again, it's planning around these things and make sure that we have in excess of what you need before you get to the point where it's like, I'm still healthy, healthy as whatever, and I'm still living and paying for these kinds of things because, like I said, you want to be able to be prepared.
I thought it was, in terms of long-term care, I thought it was better that the younger you are is the best time to purchase it, because isn't it more as you get older?
Yes. Every day, literally every single day you get closer to the moment that you need something like this, hypothetically, it gets more expensive. Same thing, anything insurance related, because all the insurance, whether it's annuity, you're trying to insure your income. Whether it's life insurance, you're insuring, obviously, your assets after you pass. So, all those kinds of insurance types of things, literally every single moment you get closer to the moment where you think, where it's planned that you'll need them, it gets more expensive. So the sooner you do it, the better for you. Let's see, when to start thinking. What's the next slide say? Long-term coverage. So we talk about insurance a lot. There's lots of different things you can add, riders or whatnot, you can add onto insurance to accomplish your individualized needs. But again, we're talking about long-term care now. It's just worth looking into just to see how, because like I said, you don't want to have to pay for that. And we're ready for questions.
So Dennis, can you give us an average amount of what long-term care is going to cost me on the monthly basis? Just an average?
I had, I was hoping that'd be one of our, when I look at long-term care, I want to say it's between, if you're younger, it might cost you $250. If you're older, it might cost you $550, $600.
Okay, so
if you're closer to that need.
What's the younger age and what's the older age?
That slide there talked about 55, 65 is like the range in which you want to start looking at it. So I'd say you probably looking at it earlier than that might be unnecessary, because the difference in cost between doing it at age 40 versus 55, it might not be much of a difference at all, because you're so far ahead of that goal. So I would say that $250 to $650 could be a range in which you might pay for long-term care.
Okay.
But it all depends on health. It all depends on the person. It depends on so many different. So even me throwing out a number is I feel kind of like, I don't want anybody. Don't hold me to that. Don't say that I said this, because again, I'll say it all depends.
Yeah. So the last time I looked into it, the guy told me this was probably about 8 years ago, and when I was 28.
Yeah.
He said it would be about $600, and I thought that was really expensive.
That is really expensive to pay that much for 70 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I don't. That's not.
Okay,
no.
so I'll come see you.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really expensive.
On long-term insurance, you have to take a real close look at your personal plan that you have. They invest the money that you pay into it, and over time, if they're not making the money that they have trajected out for the plan, you may find that your rate has doubled because they're not making as much money that they had planned to make in order to take care of you. And also, you need to take a look at your plan in terms of how much they are going to pay out, because that will make a determination on whether or not you're going to be protected when the time comes that you need that protection.
Yep, I totally agree. There's so when I mentioned earlier that bonds have a credit rating, and if I was to issue out a bond, everyone would have a particular credit rating. Same exact things exist for insurance companies. Every insurance company also has a similar credit rating, so they can look at how long it's been around, what is their solvency, how do they manage their assets, have they ever defaulted? So it looks at all of that. So now I'd say most of the people that we deal with, we don't deal with anybody who has a bad credit rating, especially from an insurance standpoint, because we know how important that is. But you definitely want to look at all that, because that's the last thing anybody needs, is to plan for it and then someone else disrupt that plan. So, yeah.
Good morning. Deacon, can you differentiate between transfer on death and beneficiary? Because in my mind, they sound the same.
Sure. That's I appreciate the easy question. So literally they are the same. Beneficiaries are specifically for retirement accounts. When you said a beneficiary, from our perspective, from the investment standpoint, a transfer on death is for non-retirement accounts. So if I had just an individual brokerage account, you would set a transfer on death on that account. But if it's specifically a retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, anything that's retirement related, or what we call a qualified account, that's when you put a beneficiary in place for those accounts. But literally they do the same thing.
So basically a bank account would be a transfer on death.
Yep, exactly. And if you were to go into any of these institutions and say, if you just went in and just used the word beneficiary, if you went into any bank and said, I want to put a beneficiary on XYZ savings account, they're going to give you a transfer on death form. So you can just use the word beneficiary and you'll get taken care of. You should get taken care of.
The long-term care through insurance, life insurance, how does that work? And also, irrevocable trust. Can you explain that a little bit more? But the life insurance covering the long-term care.
Yeah. So there's long-term care insurance it's crazy. If you look into the insurance world, you can get insurance to cover almost anything. But if it's more exotic things, then obviously that insurance is going to be much more expensive. So when you talk about long-term care, you're literally getting a policy that is just meant to be there if you ever need long-term care insurance or long-term care needs. So nursing care, nursing home, in-home care, nursing home care, anything like that. So when you buy insurance, just like car insurance, you buy insurance, there's a risk that you're paying for something that you don't need. Say if you were to pass away before you ever even needed long-term care, or say if you needed it for a day, you paid for it for $230,000 worth of coverage, but you need it for literally one day. Then you've that's the kind of the risk reward that you take.
What's the difference between getting a long-term care policy versus getting long-term care?
It sounds like the same thing, because if you would get a policy, you would get that policy through an insurance company. Sometimes like an employer will give you some of that. But yeah, those are kind of one and the same, because you would get that. Those policies are only provided by insurance companies. You're not going to, if you got it through an employer or somebody else, they're getting that through an insurance company. The other question you asked about irrevocable. So yeah, irrevocable. So if it's an irrevocable trust, you can't change it. So like the irrevocable life insurance trust, I'm designating a trust. I've gifted my money to the trust to buy life insurance. I can't change that. I think there's very rare circumstances where you can change it, but literally you're putting something in an account and you cannot change what that account is for. Revocable, I can do a trust. I can name you as a beneficiary, and if we have a fight and whatever, I can change you and switch it to you. I can do that with a revocable. You can change things. That's really all it is. So, hope that answered the question.
I'm still confused on the transfer of death. You're after me.
I think this is going to be an easy one. So
I'm still confused on the transfer of death and the beneficiary. If I have an account at the bank, say a savings account at the bank, do I need to go for a beneficiary or a transfer of death?
Great question. Actually, that is actually reminding me of something I didn't even bring up. It's funny, that question was kind of already asked, but thank you asking it again actually clarify. So if you're doing a bank account, I would say just to simplify everything, whatever kind of account you're looking to protect, just go and say, I want to add a beneficiary. Because what I would do if I'm a bank person, I would bring out a transfer on death form. So I don't want to be confusing. For a bank account, anything that's non-retirement, it would be a transfer on death is what you would set up for that account. But let me actually take it a step further. Let's say hypothetically, let's say if me and my dad have an account. And let's say that I want to eliminate all the kind of stuff that could be a headache, right? An easier step to take, especially considering bank, if you have somebody that you trust, is he can add me as a co-owner on his account. So if I were to die, there's nothing to talk about. He's still here. Everything in there is his. I don't have to worry about anything. Transfer on death is another step. If I don't want to add a co-owner to that account, I add a transfer on death. If I die, it goes to whoever's listed as my transfer on death. If we're talking specifically about my 401k, and I list my dad is my beneficiary, when I die, everything goes to him, does not go to probate. So beneficiary, that word from what we're talking about today is only concerning retirement accounts. Everything else is transfer on death. But they're literally they're interchangeable terms. Is that clear? Is that hopefully I cleared that up.
Okay, Dennis, thanks.
Yes.
Of the investment tools that you mentioned, the Roth IRA, the 401k, the annuity, is it true that you can only take like 4% out of any one of them? How do you get your income after retirement, and in what order should you do it?
That's a great
question.
question.
If you have all three of those.
That's a great question. The more of those accounts you can have, the better. It's funny you mentioned 4% because that's a number. It's like kind of like, there's a lot of things that you'll hear in this world, in this kind of investment world. We'll throw out a bunch of different standards or terms or something that people will hear and then they think that's the end all be all. So 4%, they're talking about withdrawal rates. So that's all part of your plan. So if you come and you talk to your financial advisor, you add in all the bits and pieces of who you are from a financial perspective. When one of the things that we will talk about, especially when you look at different scenarios, because you can build your plan, your standard plan, but you can build scenario 1. You're taking 4% out, and you retire at age 85, or I'm sorry, life expectancy 85, right? You're taking out 5%, life expectancy is 80. You're taking out 6%, life expectancy is 90, whatever. So we can build those things up. So there is no rule that says you have to take out 4%. That does not exist. That will all be based off of how much you want to live off. So if you have $1 million and you're taking 4%, that's 40 grand. If you're taking 5%, 50 grand a year off $1 million, if you have 2 million, maybe you don't need 5%. Maybe you only need 3%. But you taking a lower percentage is all about how long that money is going to last. And it actually dictates as well how much risk you need to take, like that whole scenario there. If we convert that into 40 years in retirement, maybe you don't have to take, like you said, 4 or 5 or whatever. Maybe you can live off of 2% because we've built up assets and we have different things coming in. So hopefully that answers the question. But yeah, that's all based on the individual, I would say, for sure.
In the interest of time, I'm going to have Khadijah be the last question, so that, Dennis he'll be back.
I'll be back
next week. But I had a simple question. And I wanted to say, until this moment, I've had 2 long-term care insurance policies. The first was named Carissa, and the second was named Sam. Joke. Listen, in the simplest of terms, can you tell folk here, because I have a selfish pastoral agenda, what would, in your opinion, be the top 2 or 3 easy, effective ways for folks to leave money to the church? Because I'd like to see our church undergirded in its long-term financial stability with endowments. Yeah. The American Baptists started with white churches at the start of the 20th century, and they've been able to manage the booms and busts, declines in congregation, and everything, because they had endowments in place. Black churches simply did not have people that had those assets 100 years ago. Yeah. And so we had full pews and were cash poor, no assets and so forth. So in the simplest of terms, to these people who have been blessed to accumulate something, how can they leave something to their church in addition to everybody else?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So one of the first things is talking about the trust that we're going to set up. So in your trust, you can name certain beneficiaries. You can say, hey, I want X amount of my what I leave behind to go to NBCF. So again, having those things in place will clarify, simplify, and also could potentially have a tax benefit as well on where your money is going to go. So I'd say setting up, having a living trust is huge. I'd say everyone, if you're living, everyone here is living, you should do that. You should have a living trust. 2 would be the beneficiary things. You can set up beneficiaries to benefit a person, an entity. You can do that. So, hey, I die tomorrow. This amount of my money, it'll be percentage. This percentage of what I have is going to go right to NBCF. There's nothing to talk about. The other one I think is pretty powerful that we talked about is that irrevocable life insurance trust. I mean, how amazing would that be? Will it be, not would it be, but will it be when I die and I have a $5 million life insurance policy, $1 million goes to NBCF, 100,000 goes to Isaiah, 100,000 goes to Isaac, because they can make their own money, and all these different people are taken care of as a way for my legacy to live on. Because you can set up endowments, you can do all kind of really awesome things that will live. One thing I think is kind of cool. I kind of get off topic. You know that Dios de la the skull, how Mexican folk, the Mexican culture, right? Their mind, Day of the Dead. So you live on because we continue to talk about you. We live because we remember you. We see your picture. An endowment. It's a way to, Dennis Williams endowment to whatever, to NBCF. My legacy will live on, hopefully forever. So it's another way to, so like I said, set up your beneficiaries correctly, have those living trusts, things like charitable remainder trust and irrevocable life insurance trusts. I think are huge because, again, money will go straight to who you want it to go to, whether it be your church, whoever. Hopefully that answers the question. Yes.
I have a suggestion to your question. And full disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Follow me in this. Imagine Write this down. Write this down. It's called the incontestable clause. Incontestable clause in a life insurance policy. I would suggest, this is not legal advice, but I would suggest that if you all applied for life insurance, get a whole bunch of policies. You're not limited to one life insurance policy, but you can buy, there are 1,800 or 2,000 life insurance companies in this country. You buy 1,800 or 2,000 life insurance policies. I'm just bringing this down to the nth degree. Did you know that if you made a statement that was not totally correct on that policy, you're diagnosed with cancer and you fail to disclose that on your policy, and the insurance company didn't discover that for 2 years, and you live 3 years and you die in year 3, you get all that money. I'm not telling you to go and lie, but this is a suggestion. You buy as much policy, get $10,000 policies, and especially the companies that don't require a medical insurance. They advertise them all the time on TV. You could get up to $100,000 of coverage without doing a medical examination. How beautiful would that be if all of us in here go out and buy us some $100,000 policies, name the church, give the church $10,000, $20,000, and as I told you, a legacy is you plant a seed in the garden that you won't see. We get a whole bunch of $50,000 coming into the church, assuming that we die appropriately. And that's another thing, is you can't kill the beneficiary in the state of Washington, because if you are a beneficiary and you whack the person, you can't collect. So be careful.
So I just had a quick question. It's pretty complicated, but I can probably talk to you later.
Sure.
I am the power of attorney for my grandmother, and there is a beneficiary set in place and all of those things. So she still owns a home, and she's 99 years old, and she's getting to the point of, she's declining a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is that the state's going to come in, and they're going to take all of her assets, what's left, because she's been in a facility for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
She has some equity in her home, and I'm trying to prevent it from them taking the home. So I was wondering if I should sell her home so that they can't take it, because if she doesn't have an asset while she's living, they can't take it.
That is, yeah.
Or
that
can
is
I buy it, even though I'm the power of attorney?
This is your grandmother, you said?
It's my grandmother.
Is she still mentally in good shape?
Pretty good. 2 years ago, I took her back to her attorney to make sure that her will was in place and is still secure.
Does she have a living trust? A living trust?
No.
So I would say that'd probably be an easy way, like a special needs trust, or one of these trusts would be, you want to talk to an estate planning attorney as soon as possible. I would say you want to get that asset spoken for in terms of how a trust can be structured around that, because then that will eliminate that being a possibility. You having to sell it. I mean, she lives in the house currently.
Well, I would prefer to buy it so it stays in the family.
Oh yeah, I'd say that, because you guys can structure that however you want. She can sell it to you for whatever dollar amount. She, at 99, I mean, how much would she need?
But is it legal being her power of attorney?
I don't see any reason why. Again, that's a lawyer question. So I'm gonna remove myself from that. So it sounds like that is a good question for Ray.
I would be very careful with that, because if it's not an arm's length transaction, it could be a problem. And I see my brother Keith in the background. He is a trust guy. You want to address that, Keith? Yeah, you have to make sure that it's an arm's length transaction, and
What does that mean?
that it's a legitimate sale. If the house is worth $300,000 and you buy it for $100,000, that will raise a red flag. So,
But it has to be a fair market value.
yes.
Right.
Maybe put it on the market and get a market analysis and then pay that price. Now, the way you structure the deal might not be a problem, but as long as it's fair market value or close to fair market value, the state won't challenge it. The problem is going to be a challenge from the state. Not the heirs, but the state will challenge it. You can get around it, but it's probably a headache you don't want to take on. Yes, Mark?
Similar situation happened, and what protected her is that the children were still living in the home. It was their primary residence, and because they were living in the house and it was their primary residence, the state couldn't touch it. So, but I don't know. But that's what happened in my situation. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, it's
if you were living there and that was your residence, I think they can't take the house.
Yeah, and I find that the state will work with you in a lot of these cases. The special needs trust is, I would take a serious look at that, because that might give you some relief.
I'll make this quick, thank you. I work in property development, and I have had a lot of folks call me in the last couple of years about wanting to do something with their homes, a lot of them in the Central District, and protect them from predatory development and all those types of things. I got a call last week from a gentleman whose father was a administrator of a church that I think, and I'm doing a title search and everything, but I think the church is in some form of trust or an estate, and his father was the administrator for that ownership vehicle of some sort. But his father passed away 6 years ago, and he's getting calls from developers that want to buy the property. They don't want to sell it to a developer. They'd actually prefer to do something else with it. But we're trying to figure out who really has the legal authority to make decisions on a property that was administered by an individual that's no longer here.
That's a complicated question. That is
And I can make an appointment with Mr. Ray. That's no problem.
Yes, that's an interesting. I don't know if you want to respond. I'm not a lawyer. I can't. I'm gonna.
And it really kind of speaks to a bigger issue. And again, I could talk to you offline. But I have a bunch of landowners who own property, valuable property, free and clear, and they want to be able to structure a model to where they could partner with a development company and create some sort of trust to have ownership in the future project in perpetuity. And so I'm working on building the model. I'll make an appointment with you, but I'm getting so many calls about it. It's just something that I just want to be able to address with these owners.
Definitely want to sit down and talk. It's a complex set of facts, and it would probably bore the folks here, but the lawyers might find it interesting and challenging. Yeah. Thank you. In wrapping up, Keith, did you want to say something?
Good afternoon, everybody. Brother, next week we're going to have questions. All of our presenters. Next week we're going to have all of our presenters back. I think question and answers. I will be here on the 13th and stand in for Brother. I think he's going to be out of town, so I just want to let everybody know that all of us are going to be back to answer more questions for you, so save them up.
A few wrap-up items. And Dennis, you were off the chain, brother. You should seriously consider taking up a career in doing this type of presentation. Especially, I go to these seminars, and there are not many faces like this that present, and the brother is incredibly credible and awesome. His new name is now Willie 17X. Couple of things. Write this down. Check out RCW 48.02.160. It's the mortality table that we use in the state of Washington. In the state of Washington. Sorry, I thought I was talking to a bunch of lawyers. RCW 48.02 0.160, and that gives you a flavor of what they're looking at. The Washington State Insurance Commissioner, this is a table that they came up with your mortality table. Actuaries probably use something different, but the point is, it tells you, for example, what your life expectancy is for male or female. Okay, so if the insurance company is using an age 84 for a female, and she lives to 101, they grossly miscalculated sort of the length, how long people will live because of technology. So you want to take that into consideration when you're doing your long-term care purchase, because you live longer, you're going to pay more. The other thing is, I want to tell you about is the privacy with respect to probate. In my cases, and that's why it's important to have a will, I don't disclose publicly the inventory, which is the assets of the estate, because people will go to the court and look it up and see how much money is in there. A crack dealer will go and look and come back and know exactly how much this guy is supposed to receive. And I can't lie to him, because he knows this guy's going to get $1.5 million in a couple of weeks. So I don't disclose inventory. If you have a will and we have non-intervention powers, we don't have to do that. The other thing, the rule of 72, write this down. The rule of 72, and I checked it with Dennis's numbers, and it's right on the money. It will, if you want to know how long it will take you to double your money, and you know what interest rate you want, if you have 8%, every 4 years your money will double. Well, over 40 years, it's going to be 4.4 times that this money doubles, and it works out to the T. Present value. When I was in business school, that used to scare the daylights out of me. I was so intimidated about present value. This week alone, I was working with a client late at night, and we're trying to evaluate whether or not he should accept a deal. And I went pulled up the present value table and made some calculations, and found out that if he were to accept that deal, he would be worse off than if he were to accept something else. So it helps you to make your evaluations and make business decisions. This is what we're trying to do. We're not making emotional decisions, but we want some objective facts to use to make our decisions. So we talked about the incontestability clause in the life insurance policy, rule of 72, present value, and privacy. Finally, I used to play Monopoly with my son and his nephews. I used to tear them up. I was mean. I still have the trophy, the Monopoly trophy at home. But check this out. These boys, they have more money than me. I remember I told my son a lesson. You need to change your attitude. You play Monopoly like Donald Trump. And he changed his attitude. He just graduated from business school, the MBA program. And as a result of that, he's more humane. He's a developer in Oakland. And he's more genteel in his approach to things. So you can change the outcome. With that, thank you for listening. I want to thank Dennis, Reverend, and my good brother Keith. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it. I won't be here next week, but I will be with you in spirit. Thank you.
Let's give Ray Cannell a hand, because he has pulled all of this together. Let's give Ray a great big hand. We still have one more week to go, but he is the person that we sat with. Actually, he and I and Sister Gloria Leonard, whose family, they had inherited some money through the family, and she left a sizable donation to the church. She brought the check down to the Hyatt, on Lake Washington. And I called Mary Reed from there, and as my witness that I gave him the check, because I'm, everybody, they don't like the preacher to hold the money in the Baptist church. So that went right into the church's savings. And she said, we need to talk about this. And because she's been struggling with some health issues, and she had to get all her final things in order. And I said, it's time for us to do this. And it was right about the time Aretha Franklin died. So, and how sad that situation was. So finally, we've been talking about this for years. And I sat down with Ray and said, can you pull together a team of relevant professionals and everything related to this subject? And let's help our people figure out where their gaps are. Afterward, they can make their own personal appointments to address their situation and to do that. Now, some of you, several of you have called me, you've texted me, you've stopped me after service on Sunday and said, I feel overwhelmed. I feel a bit overwhelmed, quite honestly. As overwhelmed as you are, and you are empowered to deal with this. Imagine how overwhelmed your survivors will be when they have to answer these same questions without the legal authority. What you're experiencing now will be to the 10th power. They'll hate you from the grave that you put them in that position. But you're overwhelmed, but you have the legal authority to address it because it's your stuff. And if you're alive to hear me, you still have time, which they won't have. They'll be behind the 8 ball. So let's work through it systematically. You can figure out what areas you need to address. You can sit down with the folks. You can get it together and have the peace of mind of knowing there will not be chaos when you leave this world. Because as Dennis always says, if you remember nothing about this, remember this, you gonna die. So let it not be, it's going to be an emotional crisis for those who love you, but it should not be a financial crisis, a legal crisis, a tax crisis. It should not be. So let us take the time we have because we're still alive and the authority you have because it's your stuff and you deal with it with the help of these people. Next week, have your questions. Next week is total Q&A. They can review anything that from the questions and stuff you put on the blog. They can see what are some of the pressing issues and come prepared to address those. But it's all your Q&A, including Sister Roche Boston. When you stand, they can see you again. Yeah, see, they're going to be talking to each other. They filled out gaps they have with each other. So she wants to talk with Dennis and all of that. So we thank God for those of you who have sat down, and let's address this. So stand to your feet. We're ready to go home. And yes, sir.
Just very quick. I just want to thank Roche and Ray and the pastor for even including me and you guys for being here and letting me help in any way that I can. So thank you.
All right. Shake your neighbor's hand and say, neighbor, I was wondering how Ray would fit in a crack comment today. You are dismissed. Go ahead, Ray.
Quickly, real quick, folks. I was asked a question last week with respect to state versus federal rights. And Michael, I believe, was a person who asked the question whether or not physician's directive live-in will would be applicable on the Madigan grounds. You remember that? The answer is emphatically yes. State law would apply, and so they would honor it. And the federal government has their own set of forms that they use. And finally, on my way in this morning, I was stopped by this guy, and he said to me, "Hey, lawyer man, I hear you in there talking about crackheads." I said, "Yeah, that's kind of true, but I was going to keep it down." He said, I just want to give you a message. Let them all know in there that crackhead lives matter."